Okay, how's everybody doing? So I want to talk about a topic that is vitally and fundamentally important to a successful diorama. Now I know there's going to be people that maybe won't like what I say or whatever, but I don't care, you know. So I've been doing this long enough and I have my opinions. Everybody has their own opinions. And just because I have an opinion doesn't necessarily mean I'm wrong about it either, right? Because I have a lot of experience in this art form and I pay all credit back, not unto myself, but to people like Sheperd Pain, François Verlinden, Pruneau, Bob Lettermen, Ray Anderson, right? I'm not going to let people assume that I just learned all this in a vacuum, because they were the godfathers of the art of the diorama. I mean, let's face it, remember the monogram sheets and the model kits? I mean, that's what inspired me, right? So what I'm showing you is just an evolution, or just a practice, a doctrine that they created and developed, because they were the ones that took the concept of the diorama from the full scale, museum style, aristocratic personal collection in Europe, all that stuff. Like, I won't go into the history of it, but they kind of pulled it into the miniature model form in the 70s or so. That's sort of an abstracted, in a nutshell, sort of summary of the art of the diorama, right? So I want to talk to you about some fundamentals that they taught me that I have been applying successfully ever since, okay? And it works. And so I'll try to keep it brief, but if you build a diorama, like, I'm just going to speak off the cuff here. Forget about the vehicle and forget about the figurines, okay? If you're going to build a diorama, like, if you're going to paint a figurine or paint a vehicle and then decide later you want to put it on a base, that's great. But if you're going to build a diorama, you should design the diorama, the composition and the shapes of it before any of that. Like, just keep it in the back of your mind, sort of simmering away, but don't let that distract you from the composition of the piece. Like, the diorama should stand on its own, okay? It should stand on its own empty. Like, I learned this as a kid when I saw a diorama like the size of a cigarette package, remember, like this, I use that term because that's what was going on back then. And it blew my mind. There was no figurine in it. I won't go into the subject right now because I want to stay focused on this, but like, notice the components here. So when you look at a diorama, like, at least in the West, like Western culture and Western psychology, because we're used to reading a book, like, we're indoctrinated by reading from left to right, left to right, left to right, story, whatever. We tend to look at art that way. Like, we look at it straight on, like it catches our attention. And then when we move in closer, we don't even realize it, but this has been proven psychologically, that we sort of shift to the left and then we go across the diorama without even knowing it. Like, if you think about it, like, really, like be aware of that when you go to a show, you'll see that happens, right? So I learned from Sheperd Pain was that, like, if you want the viewer to slow down, then you have things going against the grain, like from the right to the left, like you're moving this way, so you model things like staircases and figures walking to the left, so you'll stop and look at them just milliseconds longer, okay? Like, this is a little bit deep for some, but I totally got it when I read his book Till They Fell Apart, like all those books by Ray Anderson, Sheperd Pain, etc., right? So, like, here's an example. Like, I want to design this diorama so it stands without anything on it. Like, there's going to be a vehicle on this and a figurine, which I had to order from Japan. It'll probably be here in 2 months or something. But anyway, so notice how when you look at this, right? Like, I'll use this as an example. Like, notice how the eye tends to go, oh, I'm going to go into that stairwell there, and then I'm going to go up those stairs and then off the diorama, like off into the background, right? Like, it's simple, right? But you can actually control the subconscious viewership of the observer that way, right? And then there's the shapes, right? Like, notice the shapes. So I talked about symmetry and balance. Like, you don't want, like, even shapes, like the same shapes in the footprint of your diorama. Like, notice how this is taller. It's not really heavier than this because it's skinnier, right? Like, weight-wise, right? Remember I talked about the teeter-totter effect? When you went on a teeter-totter and your kid and your friend that was heavier than you and you went like that. So you want to balance the teeter-totter with weight using different shapes. Like that's what real balance is, like in a painting, a sculpture, and most notably a diorama, right? Okay, so you can see that I'm gonna, like, see the angle, the oblique angle? This is another fundamental, that you should shift your scene on an angle, even if it's only a couple of degrees. Don't run it straight. Now this is my opinion, but it's based on Sheperd Pain, and he was right. Don't run your building or your vehicle square to the edge. Set them on an angle, like a road. Like notice this texturing here. See how it's on an angle? It just goes off, like it almost like if your eye comes here, it pulls you into the scene, and then this curve, you know. So that, like, I know it sounds philosophically deep, but try to think about that when you design your diorama, because if you do, it will be successful. It will be the difference. If you're, okay, I'll just mention this, if you're in competition, whether it's everyone gets a medal or IPMS, I don't care, a show is a show to me. But if you get two artists that are equally technically like perfect, the one like within a diorama, let's say, the one that has good composition and better balance will generally win, okay?